Good morning.
Morning.
I'm here with Elizabeth Vanami. She is a professor at UMKC, and we're going to have her introduce herself.
Great. So yes, I'm Dr. Beth Vanami. I am a political science professor, but I'm also Associate Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at UMKC. And I teach courses on, and I do research on American politics. And what I really focus on, though, are voters and how voters make decisions, what drives those decisions, whether it's party or it's something more specific about the candidate. And that's really what I focus on.
Oh, that's really interesting. So you were probably super busy this year then,
Yes,
weren't you?
I tell my colleagues I teach all the fun classes.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure lots of debate in the
Those
classes.
classes are very, very tense sometimes.
Yeah, I bet they are. So, how did you get to where you are now?
That's an interesting story. Since I was very little, probably 8 years old, I wanted to be president of the
Of
United
course,
States,
of course.
as one does. And but more specifically, I wanted to be a lawyer. And then I
Okay.
got to college and I started taking government and political science classes. And I just really loved studying politics more than I thought I would actually like studying the law. And so I had a professor that said, you're really good at this. Seem really interested in it. Have you thought about graduate school? And I was like, no, I've always planned law school. He's
Right.
like, well, start looking into grad school and tell me what you think. And I was like, okay. And so I looked in and I was like, oh, I can teach other people about politics and how to understand it. And so I never looked back. I had already registered for the LSAT and I was like, nope, not doing it. And so I applied to graduate schools and I got in and I went to graduate school in Houston. I grew up in Texas, so I went to graduate school at Rice in Houston. And then I came to UMKC straight out of my graduate program and have never left. I love Kansas
Oh,
City. And so that's where we want to live.
that's oh, awesome. Great. Well, I love Kansas City too. I'm from Pittsburgh, Kansas, so
Just
it's
down the
like
road, not too far.
yeah, exactly, not too far, not Texas. So, where would you like to see your career go in the future?
So I mean, like I said, we really love
You
Kansas
really?
City. My husband
Hmm.
is a political science professor here as well,
Oh,
and
okay.
so we love raising our kids here. And so what I'd like in the future is really to be able to spend a lot more time focusing on students, particularly adult learners, students who are
Oh,
going back to school. That's really a passion of mine because I have a lot
okay.
of family members who that was sort
That's
of their story. And so that's where I'd like to focus a lot of attention is how do we get adult learners through the, bachelor
right.
degree in a timely manner.
Okay, awesome. And what is your favorite part of your day?
So my favorite part is actually when students who've graduated email me or connect with me on social media and tell me what they're doing. That's really exciting to me because we have students doing so many amazing things. I have a student who's at the World Bank. We have students who work for the Federal Reserve. We've got students who are big time lawyers in New York and DC. And that's really exciting to me to connect with those students. But even those who, have sort of maybe more mundane careers, I love hearing about them and their families. And it's like your children are,
Oh,
growing
yeah.
up. So that's the really exciting part of my job is to see students succeed in classes and then graduate.
Oh,
And
nice.
come back and tell me about how
I
awesome.
was gonna say, then you've made a difference.
Right, right.
So
That's
that
really
is really
exciting.
nice.
Yeah.
And what is your least favorite part of your job?
I think students would anticipate I would say grading, but that's actually not. So when I was just teaching, then grading was not the most pleasurable part. But
Right.
right now, being associate dean, I'm associate dean over finance,
Oh,
and
really?
so it's
Okay.
with COVID-19 that's been really challenging
Oh,
to sort of
definitely.
manage budgets. So that's actually my least favorite part right now
Least.
is telling people no, they can't spend money.
Oh, yeah.
But normally it's grading. That would be my least favorite part.
Least favorite. Yeah, I'm sure being in charge of finance isn't It's not a glamorous job at
No, it's not
all.
glamorous. It's a lot less amusing than teaching, for sure.
Exactly, exactly. What was the first job you had, and what did you learn from
That's a good question. So I I started babysitting at 12 years old.
Okay. Uh-huh.
But then my first real job was at a dry cleaners. I was 17, I think, and 16 or 17. And it was South Texas in the
Okay.
summer. There was no air conditioning.
Oh,
And I was lifting really heavy bags of clothes all day. And I just, at the end of that summer, I thought, there's no way I want to do this for the rest of my life. And I was like, I'm going to college, I am graduating, and I'm going to do a job in which I do not have to be in this sweltering heat lifting clothes all day. So it was a very motivating experience.
oh, I bet. Yeah, definitely.
Probably not the way they intended, but certainly I was motivated to never work in that job again.
Exactly, to do a little bit more.
Right, right.
So that's cool. And can you explain a little bit about how the education, especially like a PhD, how that all works together?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I grew up in South Texas, and then I moved to West Texas to go to Angelo State University.
Okay.
And there they don't have political science, they have something called government, but it's the same. They just
Same.
call it government. And so I did that as my undergraduate, and I got a bachelor's degree in that. And then I went to graduate school at Rice in Houston, and I did my master's degree, and then I did my doctorate degree. And so that took about 5 years, the master's and the doctorate degree.
Okay.
And it's intensive. It's a lot of coursework and a lot of writing. But in the end, completely worth it, because then I got this job, and, I get to teach and do research and talk to people about politics, 90% of my day, which is really exciting.
Oh, that's cool. It's great when what you've learned just goes and you enjoy it.
Oh yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's always
Absolutely.
so, because a lot of times we end up taking different paths.
Yes. As long as you eventually get to where you're supposed to be, I think it's okay to take a varied path. But for me,
Definitely.
it was much straighter than I had anticipated.
Uh-huh. That's great. And what would you say your definition of success is?
So for me, I think, the most meaningful definition of success for me is when I see my students putting in time, energy to learn a concept that is really hard. And then, later, this is why grading is both great and not much fun, is that the great part is when you teach something to somebody and then you ask them to apply it and they can. That's really exciting to me. So for me in teaching, that's really the success part, is can my students take what they've learned and actually apply it either in the real world or on an exam, whatever the context may be. But for, in terms of my research, I think the success is really, coming up with a really interesting question, like why. So one of the things I study is scandal. And so, why do some politicians get away with it and others don't? And that's, posing that question and then doing a really interesting project to try to discover the answer is really exciting and gives me a lot of enjoyment and fulfillment.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, that sounds, you don't think of all those things being involved. So
Yeah,
I'm sure it's kind of interesting to do
it is fun.
those different, find out more about what people are thinking.
Yes, yes.
So what would you suggest to students to help them prepare for a similar career?
So I think there are two things I would say, and I'll talk about each. So one thing I think is really critical is to work hard. I think a lot of people sort of assume that it takes brains to be really successful, and you have to be really smart to be really successful. And I actually think that, the most successful people I know are actually people who work really, really hard. Some of them are also really, really smart. Some not as smart, but they work really hard and they're successful at their careers. And so I would say that's the first thing is, every time you have something in front of you, devote your time and energy to it and do a good job with it. So that's the first thing. The second, I think, and this is what I always tell my students here, is take advantage of any opportunity that comes your way. Sometimes students sort of, if somebody says, hey, there's a speaker coming on this topic, they're like, oh, do I want to go? I don't know. Like, I'm not going to know anyone. go. You never know what's going to happen from that experience. You might meet the speaker, they may remember you later when you need a job, or you might meet somebody sitting right next to you who, happens to be the, CEO of a corporation that you end up working for. You never know what sort of opportunities are going to come your way. And I think that's especially true for internship opportunities. Anytime you can get into the field and actually work on, in the field that you're interested in, you should absolutely do it. Even if it's grunt work, even if you're like, why am I schlepping coffee and answering phones? You're doing it for a reason, because you're meeting people and you're learning how to work in sort of a collaborative environment. And so I think students should take advantage of all those kinds of opportunities that come their way. You never know when they're going to pay off in the long run.
Yeah, that's great advice. We have several of our speakers have said that,
Absolutely.
you always want to try things because you don't know what you might actually want. You might
That's
find that,
right.
oh, wow, this exists and I want to go that way.
That's right. And
So,
I think a negative experience is also really valuable. So we've had
exactly.
students who, we used to have the scholarship program where students would go to DC for the summer and intern in Congress. And I had, I'd say about a third of the students come back and say, I discovered I don't want to have anything to do with Congress, like, or politics in that realm. I want
Right.
to go into government. I want to go into nonprofit. And I think that's really valuable, because just like me, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer my whole life. And
Exactly.
it wasn't until I started actually studying for the LSAT and I started thinking about, what kind of lawyer do I really want to be? And I didn't want to be a particular type of lawyer. I wanted to go to law school and keep studying.
Right.
And it turns out that that's in the end, you have to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
So, it's important to think through, what is it that you really want? And then, try to seek out those experiences.
That's great. Yes, thanks for all the advice.
Sure.
So we appreciate you being here and sharing your
Absolutely.
story. So, and I know the kids will really enjoy it. So
Excellent.
thanks, Elizabeth.
Sure, no problem.